This video is sponsored by Squarespace. More about them later. I beat a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon Emerald Rogue, the ROM hack that reimagines Pokémon Emerald as a roguelike, procedurally generated permadeath adventure that is as painfully difficult as it is endlessly fun. Routes, Pokémon, items, and even gym leaders are all randomly chosen so that you never know what to expect at any given moment. In my last Emerald Rogue video, I showed you how my very first attempt ended in Shakespearean tragedy as I wiped to my own mascot. It was definitely a low point, but that was once upon a time a few mistakes ago, and from the ashes of that tragedy, Attempt 2 was born, and I was stronger and more determined than ever to defeat Emerald Rogue or die trying. And I did. I died. Against the first Elite Four member, it was bad. But then, from the ashes of that tragedy, Attempt 3 was born, and I lost to the very first trainer on the very first route. But from 3 attempts worth of ashes, Attempt 4 was born, and you know what they say, right? Fourth time's the charm. That's definitely a saying. And Attempt 4 is where things get interesting. Once again, it's time to embark on a journey of randomness through the perils of Emerald Rogue. Let's do it. In Emerald Rogue, the starter for every playthrough remains the same until you've beaten the game at least once. So as I exit the long foreboding tunnel at the start of every run and emerge onto the first of, hopefully, many world maps, I'm accompanied by my old friend, Helium the Ghastly. Every time Helium and I have embarked on our journey, I've had to watch him die. Does the same fate await Helium in Attempt 4, or will he at long last live long enough to ride off into the sunset? Only time will tell. World maps are made up of procedurally generated encounters. At the end of each world map is a randomized boss battle. If you beat the boss battle, the level cap rises, you're dumped onto a new world map, and you repeat the process until all 8 gym leaders, 4 Elite Four members, and 2 champions are defeated. Since this is a Nuzlocke, I'm only allowed to catch the first Pokemon I find in each randomized encounter. And obviously, if a Pokemon faints, it's dead forever. In my first 2 encounters of the playthrough, I catch a Sandshrew named Silicone and a Wooper named Hydrogen. I also find 3 link cables, which means that when the time comes, I'll be able to evolve Helium all the way into Gengar. Fourth time's the charm indeed. Our first randomized gym leader is Flannery, which all things considered is great. We have 2 ground types, and it's nice to get Flannery out of the way early before the gym leaders start getting permanent field effects. Flannery's lead is a Torkoal with Drought, so she does still get the sun up for at least 5 turns. Fortunately, Torkoal doesn't seem to have much in the way of damaging moves, so Hydrogen is able to come in and take him out with a few mud shots. Next is Numel, and since the sun is still up, a boosted Flame Burst gets 3 hit points away from killing sweet little Hydrogen. We retaliate with a mud shot that does about 50%. I switch to Silicone on the next turn as Numel goes for a magnitude 8. Fortunately, Silicone is bulkier than he looks, and Numel is as weak as he looks. On the following turn, a magnitude of our own kills the little camel. Flannery's final Pokemon is Ponyta, who outspeeds to hit a pretty strong Flame Wheel before Silicone claps back with a magnitude 8 for the one-shot and the victory. That's 1 gym badge down. Which means that it's time for 2 more encounters. The first is a Spinarak named Arsenic, and unlike most ROM hacks, Emerald Rogue doesn't buff any Pokemon. So my new Itsy Bitsy Spider is an 8-legged sack of suck. Wait, why does Spinarak only have 6 legs? And better question, why does Ariados only have 4? How have I never noticed that before? Well, whatever. Next up, I find a Mine-In on an average Chili route who's just minding his own business. With Magnesium as teammate number 5, my squad's looking like a band of misfit toys as I head into the fight against the second gym leader, Juan. Yet another weather user before permanent field effects. Nice. He leads with Azumarill and I lead with Hydrogen. Azumarill locks herself into rollout as Hydrogen nails her with a Scald that gets a pretty lucky burn. This gives me a safe switch into Magnesium, who swiftly kills Azumarill on the following turn. Quillfish is second, so I go back to Hydrogen on yet another rollout. Bold strategy, Juan. Let's see if it pays off. It does not. Wartortle is third, and so help me Arceus, if this thing uses rollout, I'm gonna freaking lose it. He ends up just going for Protect as I switch in Magnesium, so I can lock him into it with an Encore. Juan switches, meaning we can nail the Croconaw that comes in with an Electro Ball. That doesn't kill, but the next one does, so Juan's down to just his Wartortle. Yet another Electro Ball brings him to under 50%, the turtle hits a soft bubble, and then we take the kill on the next turn, winning us the second gym badge. A new world map means a new set of potential encounters. First up is a Torkoal named Tungsten. She doesn't have Drought, but we can fix that with an ability capsule soon enough. Or alternatively, I just find a shiny Torkoal 5 minutes later, and she has Drought. Gotta love shiny claws. Welcome to the team, Tungsten 2. Oh, also, somehow I found Pokerus during this attempt. I have no idea when or how, but 4th time's the charm isn't a very real saying for nothing. Did you know that subscribing to the channel will increase your odds of finding shinies and Pokerus? It's what experts are calling the one ball HG guarantee, baby. With a full team of 6 Pokemon, I now have to decide if subsequent encounters are worth replacing one of my current team members, since Emerald Rogue does not have a PC system. The Skarmory I find on a tough wet route is an obvious replacement for Arsenic the Ariados. Thank you for your service, Arsenic. I'm like 90% sure that I didn't use him a single time, but feel free to check out the VODs on my VODs channel and prove me wrong. Aluminum, or Aluminium if you're a silly goose, is a phenomenal addition to the team. With fantastic physical defense and access to utility moves like Spike, Stealth Rock, and Roost, she'll be very useful in many key matchups. Plus, her ability Sturdy is quite literally a lifesaver in situations where I have no idea what a given Pokemon may or may not have. But at least for the fight against the 3rd gym leader, who once again happens to be Watson, Aluminum is going to be watching from the bench. Watson leads with Manectric and I lead with Silicone. I hard switch to Hydrogen on an Overheat, which does very little damage. The dog continues to plug away with her Fire-type moves, so Hydrogen just puts her to sleep with a Yawn and manages to stay healthy with Recover. Then we go for a Dig. Watson switches out, so Hydrogen ends up hitting Ampharos, which does almost enough to get the one-shot. I switch to Helium as Ampharos goes for a Heal Bell to wake up Manectric. But then a Shadow Ball takes out the Lamb. Electabuzz is next, so we nail him with a Shadow Ball as he just sets up a light screen. Then we nail him with a Hypnosis, which was stupid since a Shadow Ball could just get the KO, and Hypnosis obviously has really low accuracy. Looking back over the footage, the reason I did this is because I thought that Watson would switch Electabuzz out since he has no way to hit Helium, which is definitely not true. What I was probably remembering is how in attempt 1, Electabuzz had no way to hit Titanium the Rhyhorn. How I got those 2 Pokemon so mixed up is beyond me, but sometimes humans are dumb, and unfortunately, I am human. Regardless, my stupidity is unpunished and Minun comes out next, so I switch to Magnesium as Watson sets up a substitute. We can lock her into substitute with Encore, which effectively ends the game because it forces her to switch out to Watson's last Pokemon, who was also his first Pokemon, Manectric. And then a few turns later, Hydrogen is able to take out the dog and the mouse with a few digs, winning us the 3rd gym badge. My next encounter is a Gulpin, but I have very little interest in saying goodbye to one of my 6 current Pokemon. The bonds between my teammates and I are unbreakable. It's about loyalty. I'm not just gonna toss out one of my brothers in arms for the next new shiny— Ooh, look, a Lapra! With Cobalt joining the squad, our team is shaping up to be legendary. It's gonna take a pretty phenomenal encounter for me to turn my back on— Ooh, a Latios! Gimme. Okay, well now the team is looking absolutely stacked. It's sad to have to say farewell to Silicone and Magnesium, but it's better to let them go than to have them die in battle. It's nice to know that they'll go on to live happy and full lives, something that certainly can't be said about my 6 current team members, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Next up is the fight against the 4th gym leader, Winona. The irony of throwing out my electric type right before the flying type gym leader is not lost on me. Her lead is a Beautifly, which is easily one of the scariest flying types she could possibly have. I switch to Aluminum as Beautifly sets up a Quiver Dance, which would actually be scary on virtually any other Pokemon. Winona gets greedy and goes for a second Quiver Dance, so Aluminum takes her out with a single Drill Peck. Togetic is 3rd, and I reason I'm safe with Sturdy still intact, so I set up a layer of Stealth Rock as Togetic uses Safeguard. Then I hit him with a super effective Steel Wing. Ancient Power comes out for a smidge of damage, so we just finish him off with a Drill Peck on the following turn. 3rd is Yanma, who takes 50% from Stealth Rock and then goes down to a Drill Peck. And 4th is Gligar. Winona's team could really stand to take a field trip to Sinnoh. I guess the lack of later generations until we beat the game cuts both ways. Cobalt is able to come in and kill Gligar with an Ice Beam, so last for Winona is Jump Pluff. He appears to be a Protect substitute and probably Leech Seed stall set, so it takes a little while to take him down, but eventually we do, and Winona is handily defeated. So, time for more encounters, but again, it's gonna take a pretty extraordinary encounter to replace one of these 6 Pokemon, and this time I actually mean that. First is an Electabuzz that can evolve into an Electivire. Pass. And second is a Gligar that can evolve into Glysaur. Pass again. Which means it's time for the fight against the 5th gym leader, who happens to be Norman. Without a fighting type, this isn't exactly our best matchup. He leads with Wigglytuff and I lead with Aluminum. A Steel Wing leaves her with a Sliver, so she retaliates with a strong Fire Blast, boosted by a Life Orb that ends up taking her out. But that was a pretty lousy trade for me. Delcatty comes in next, so I switch to Helium. Since I don't have Sludge Bomb yet, our strongest move is Thunderbolt, so that's what I go for as Delcatty switches out into Ursaring. It does just about 50% as Ursaring gets burned by her Flame Orb, activating her Guts ability. She's probably going for Crunch, and without a Dark Resist, I don't have much of a choice but to stay in and go for the kill with Thunderbolt. But sadly, we get a low roll, the Mama Bear survives, and Helium goes down to a Crunch. Is attempt 4 just a repeat of my previous 3 attempts? Helium's dead, and I'm worried that the rest of my team isn't far behind. In Emerald Rogue, if you aren't careful, a single death can very quickly snowball into more and more deaths until you're looking at a full-blown wipe. I owe it to the rest of my team, and to Helium's memory, to do everything in my power to prevent that from happening. For now, Plutonium can come in for his debut battle, finish off Norman's Ursaring, and also one-shot Furret with a Psychic. Tungsten 2 then comes in and takes care of Delcatty and Persian with a few body presses, winning us the battle for the 5th gym badge. If Norman is still canonically my father in this game, he's a pretty lousy dad, but what's new? On the next world map, I have the choice of 3 paths, and all of them only have one chance to catch a new Pokemon. So I picked the center path such that I'll be able to visit both the Mart Rest Stop and the Battle Prep Rest Stop. My encounter in the average swarming route is a Dunsparce, which is quite bad. And yes, I do know that Serene Grace Paraflinch is a thing. This is still a trash encounter, especially when I don't know my enemy's movesets. And even the most ardent Dunsparce supporters have to admit that Sodium is a massive step down from Helium, which is why I immediately speak to the well-dressed gentleman loitering around the Mart Rest Stop like a teenager in the 90s. For the cheap price of $1,000, the WDG will let me randomly trade away one of my Pokemon. In truly chaotic neutral fashion, I could also trade away all of my Pokemon for free, but that would be objectively the dumbest thing I've ever done. So for now, I bid farewell to Sodium and welcome in an Electrike. Other than the fact that we can't evolve him until the next level cap, this is a perfectly solid encounter and certainly could have been much worse. I name him Copper and the journey continues. The next boss battle is against Brawly, who has a pretty atrocious matchup into most of my team. His lead Breloom gets killed with a single Drill Peck from my lead, Aluminum. Medicham comes out second, which is certainly scary, but since we have Sturdy, I reason I'm relatively safe to stay in. Surprisingly, we just outspeed and kill her with a Drill Peck. Third is Poliwrath, and she's bulky enough to handily survive a Drill Peck, but all she can do is fire off a Soft Liquidation before going down on the following turn. Machamp is 5th and is only able to hit my tanky bird with a single knockoff before going down to 2 Drill Pecks. Last is Hitmontop, so I fire off 2 more Drill Pecks and call it a day. Aluminum is an absolute beast, though it wasn't until Hitmontop that I realized how bad it would have been if any of Brawly's Pokemon had counter, but they didn't, so yay me. There's very few things in this world more impressive than Aluminum single-handedly sweeping Brawly. Captain Sully Sullenberger's successful emergency landing of US Airways Flight 1549 on the Hudson River, saving the lives of all 155 passengers and crew members, is certainly one of them, as is how simple it is to create a website with the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Squarespace is an online platform that helps you build and manage your own website, whether that's an online store for your business or a personal blog for your thoughts. Designing a website used to be time-consuming and difficult, but with Squarespace's all-in-one platform, you can easily design a professional and polished website in just the time it took Captain Sully Sullenberger to successfully complete an emergency landing of US Airways Flight 1549 on the Hudson River, saving the lives of all 155 passengers and crew members. It was just a matter of minutes. With the help of Squarespace's customizable templates, I created poppyhg.com, the one and only destination to find curated pictures of my corgi puppy Poppy. I've never had the honor of meeting him, but if I was to ever ask Captain Sully Sullenberger, who successfully completed an emergency landing of US Airways Flight 1549 on the Hudson River, saving the lives of all 155 passengers and crew members, I'm sure he'd agree that visiting poppyhg.com is a good use of your time. Squarespace also has a ton of other really useful features, like analytic information about the traffic of your website, the ability to add and play embedded videos directly on your website, and Squarespace member areas, which can be used to connect with audiences and create exclusive members-only content. So, if you're looking to start a website for your business or hobby, then you should absolutely check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch your website, you can use my custom link to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to the challenge. Before the 7th gym leader, I can peek at 3 more potential encounters. The first is a Rhydon, so that's a hard pass. The second is a Yanma, so that's an even harder pass. And the third is another potential legendary Pokemon. But given that it appears to be an Ice-type legendary, this is either Articuno or Regice, neither of which are particularly good, and certainly not worth replacing anyone on my team. So I just turn around and leave. Side note here, a lot of people, myself included, usually ban legendaries in their Nuzlocks, but since the final trainers in this game actually do have legendaries, sometimes more than one, I decided that they're fair game. So time for the 7th gym leader, Liza. She leads with Slowking and I lead with Plutonium. I decide to try and set up a cheeky Calm Mind sweep, but Liza puts an end to that by hitting Plutonium with Toxic. Even at +1, a Shadow Ball doesn't kill Slowking, so Plutonium has to tank a Scald and several turns of toxic damage. We're able to kill the Chimecho that comes in second, but after that, the toxic damage is just doing too much to stay in. So I switch to Aluminum as Espeon goes for Shadow Ball. I was hoping for Dazzling Gleam, but oh well. Espeon then goes for Calm Mind on the next turn as Aluminum hits him with a Drill Peck. Even with a crit, it's not a KO, so this is pretty scary. Fortunately, Espeon just starts going for Morning Sun, and even with Leftovers recovery, Drill Peck is doing ever so slightly more damage than he can recover. So after a few turns, Drill Peck takes her out, and we've gotten back to almost full HP with our own Leftovers. Grumpig is next, so I nail her with a Drill Peck, which doesn't even do 50%. That's not great given that she went for a Calm Mind, but with Leftovers recovery, Aluminum is back to full HP and safe to at least one hit. So we stay in, land a Drill Peck, and Liza gets greedy with another Calm Mind. Easy peasy. Mr. Mime is next, so I keep plugging away with Aluminum. She outspeeds us, probably Choice Scarfed, but all Mr. Mime can do is hit a few Psychics, meaning that Aluminum gets her 3rd kill of the match. Last is Claydol, so I switch out to Cobalt on a shockingly limp Psychic. Then a few Ice Beams take out Claydol, and the battle is won. My first encounter on the next board is a strong Pokemon den where I find an Exeggutor. This is a really solid Pokemon, especially with Sun support from Tungsten 2. But with the Elite Four rapidly approaching, I decide that she's not worth replacing one of my teammates with. Exeggutor has truly terrible matchups into Sydney, Phoebe, and Glacia. She's not particularly useful into Drake or Steven either. The only argument is that she'll be great for the final gym leader, who by process of elimination is Roxanne, and also the champion Wallace. But the question then is, who would she replace? An obvious option is Copper. Last one in, first one out. But Copper is quite speedy, and an electric type is also good to have for Wallace. Plus, with Cobalt and Hydrogen's water absorb abilities, Plutonium's water type resistance, and the ability to remove the rain with Tungsten 2, I'm honestly not that worried about Wallace anyways. The next encounter is a Parasect, so that's going to be yet another hard pass. Given all of these lousy encounters, it's actually a miracle my team is as stacked as it is. But now it's time for the fight against the final gym leader, Roxanne. The final gym leader is where it all went wrong in attempt 1. Ironically, it was also Roxanne. But this time I'm better prepared and my team has a significantly stronger matchup. She leads with Aggron, and I lead with Cobalt. Unlike in Attempt 1, I immediately set up a Rain Dance to remove Roxanne's Sandstorm. I also gave Cobalt a Charty Berry so that the damage from Aggron's Head Smash is halved. The lack of recoil damage indicates that Aggron is Rock Head instead of Sturdy, so a Brine gets the one-shot on the following turn. Corsola comes in second, so I just kill her with a Freeze Dry. Well, actually it takes 2 Freeze Dries, but all she does is set up Stealth Rock. Nosepass is third and has Sturdy, so a Brine doesn't get the one-shot. But all she does is use Volt Switch for a sliver of damage. This does bring in Aerodactyl though, so that means that it's time for Cobalt to head out. Aluminum comes in on a soft Rock Slide. Aerodactyl protects for a turn, which lets me set up a Stealth Rock for free. Then he goes for Rock Slides as we go for Steel Wings. Our first Steel Wing boosts our defense because Aluminum is an animal. By the time Aerodactyl falls, we've only taken about 50%, and Aluminum gets a second defense boost. MVP of the run right here. Fourth is Nosepass, who actually does survive the Stealth Rock damage thanks to the previously activated Berry Juice, but we obviously just kill her with a Drill Peck. Next is Solrock, and fearing a potential fire move like Flamethrower, I switch to Hydrogen. They just go for a Will-O-Wisp though. Hydrogen can pretty comfortably tank Solrock's attacks, put them to sleep with Yawn, stay healthy with Recover, and then kill them with a couple Scalds. So last is Shuckle. This Roxanne team is so much easier than the Roxanne team in Attempt 1. No Tyranitar, no Cradily, this is a walk in the park. Hitting Shuckle with a Scald activates her red card, so Hydrogen gets forced out, and Aluminum comes back in. So she gets to close things out with one last Steel Wing, winning us the 8th and final gym badge of Emerald Rogue. Which means that it's time for the Elite Four. Unlike in regular Pokemon games though, the Elite Four isn't a gauntlet. There's still world maps between each battle, which will be useful for getting items from rest stops. Theoretically, I could also get a new encounter from the Strong Pokemon Den here, but it's a Lantern, which really isn't better than any of my current team members. So I run. That ends up being a bit of a misplay because this Lantern was the only way for me to level up to the new level cap of 88, meaning that I'm heading into the fight against the first Elite Four member under-leveled. Anyways, the order of Elite Four members is totally random, and unlike against the gym leaders, there's no statue that you can pay to find out who's next. My first Elite Four member happens to be the actual first Elite Four member, Sydney, who specializes in dark types. He leads with Houndoom and I lead with Copper. Equipped with a Choice Specs, Houndoom outspeeds to hit a Dark Pulse, almost certainly indicating a Choice Scarf. Copper survives and fires off a nasty Volt Switch, granting me a safe switch into Cobalt. Houndoom switches out and brings in Shiftry, who gets lightly sprinkled by a Surf. So I swap in Aluminum as Shiftry prepares for a Solar Blade. He outspeeds and reveals a Life Orb on the next turn as I get a little greedy and set up a Stealth Rock. On the next turn, Shiftry uses Knockoff, which is really annoying. I was probably better off just getting the kill instead of setting up rocks, but at least Aluminum still has Roost. Houndoom comes in next, so I switch to Hydrogen on a Fire Blast. I thought Houndoom might switch, so I go for Yawn, but she just stays in. This ends up being fine because Hydrogen can use Recover to get back to basically full HP on the turn Houndoom falls asleep. Then a Scald takes her out on the following turn. That brings in Crawdaunt third, so I switch to Cobalt, who gets hit by a massive, presumably adaptability boosted knockoff. But then we can outspeed and kill him with a Freeze Dry. It's nice that the Stealth Rock means that we don't have to worry about Focus Sashes. Tyranitar comes in fourth and sets up the sand. Where have I seen this matchup before? I swap to Hydrogen on a Rock Tomb. Tyranitar reveals Leftovers instead of Assault Vest, but it doesn't really matter. Since she can't do much damage to Hydrogen, he's free to put her to sleep with Yawn, use Recover to stay healthy, and kill her with 2 Earthquakes. Hydrogen is a god. Sneasel is 5th, so after taking a knockoff, we kill him with an Earthquake. Last up is Sableye, and the only thing he can really do is use Foul Play, so just to be safe, I switch to Tungsten 2, who comes in on a Will-O-Wisp. Then a Flamethrower gets the KO, and the battle against the first member of the Elite Four is won. The only encounter before the next Elite Four member is a Piloswine, who I kill in order to get to the new level cap of 91. Then it's Phoebe time. I swear the Elite Four can be in a random order. Phoebe leads with Sableye and I lead with Tungsten 2. After tanking an annoying knockoff that removes my leftovers, a sun-boosted Flamethrower gets the KO. Second is Venusaur, which isn't Ghost type, but I guess sorta matches Phoebe's Hawaiian style, maybe? I don't know. I switch to Aluminum on an Earth Power. Venusaur switches, indicating that it's likely choice locked. The Shedinja that takes his place is immediately killed by a Drill Peck, so then in comes Gengar, which frankly is a pretty scary Pokemon to see here. I switch to Copper as he goes for Focus Blast, which mercifully doesn't get a crit and my little pupper lives. I use Volt Switch to get a free switch, but rather frustratingly, a Discharge would have just gotten the KO. That was a misplay. Hydrogen comes in and tanks a nasty Shadow Ball, but then Gengar's Life Orb takes him out, so all things considered, that could have gone much worse. Venusaur comes in next, so I switch back to Aluminum on a Leaf Storm. He reveals a Life Orb here, so I guess Phoebe just switched because Venusaur can't do much to Aluminum with any of his attacks. Another switch brings in Dusclops, who takes a Drill Peck to the face. I switch to Hydrogen as Dusclops sets up Trick Room. Then Hydrogen does what he does best. Yawn, Recover, and Earthquake to take out Dusclops at basically full HP. This brings Venusaur back out, so it's back to Aluminum on another Leaf Storm. Phoebe switches, this time into her final Pokemon, Scizor. Not sure I can explain this one, but whatever. Drill Pecks do solid damage, though Scizor is able to knock off our leftovers before we take him out. But since Venusaur is the only Pokemon left, it doesn't matter, especially because we can outspeed and kill him with one last Drill Peck. Aluminum has been hard carrying this run, even in fights when I wasn't expecting it. It's pretty tough to see anything getting in our way now. We are truly unstoppable.
So I think it's wise to avoid these trainers as much as possible, right?
12 seconds later.
Ah! I was not expecting that. Well, fingers crossed. Good God. Oh, that was a crit. I mean, bet. Please don't. Please don't have that. Please don't have what I think you do. No!
Please indulge me while I whine about this for just a few moments, because what the actual man? This Magneton is quite literally the perfect counter to Aluminum, and the only Pokemon that I could have ran into that's able to trap her in and also kill her. Magnet Pull is known by exactly 2 Pokemon in the first 3 generations, the other being Nosepass, which wouldn't be able to deal enough damage to Aluminum without getting very lucky with full paralysis from Zap Cannon. And speaking of Zap Cannon, if it wasn't guaranteed to paralyze us, we could pretty easily stall Magneton out with Roost. But since we do get our speed dropped, we can't use Roost to drop our flying type before getting hit by another one, and as long as Magneton hits at least one of the next 2 Zap Cannons, Aluminum is dead. They do, so she is. And I am pissed. But that's Emerald Rogue for you. Expect the unexpected, especially against random avoidable trainers. RIP Aluminum. From here on out, this run is dedicated to you. The best I can do for her legacy is to not get tilted and defeat this challenge once and for all. This starts by catching a 6th team member, which happens to be a Rhydon. It's looking a lot like Attempt 1 in here. Cesium is no Aluminum, but I could do a lot worse, and beggars can't really be choosers. Let's just try not to wipe against the 3rd Elite Four member, Drake. See, I told you the order is random. Drake leads with Altaria, and I lead with Tungsten too. Altaria hits us with a Toxic, and we retaliate with a Yawn. On the next turn, I go for Protect to avoid getting hit by a Hurricane as Altaria falls asleep. This gets me a safe switch to Plutonium, but Drake too switches out, presumably to remove Altaria's sleep with Natural Cure. Flygon comes in next. Not again, Flygon, not again. With a Habanberry on Plutonium to keep me safe from any super effective dragon moves, I go for a Dragon Dance. Drake just ends up switching into Kingdra though. I have no idea why, but because he did do that, we now have the speed advantage with Plutonium to play around potential Choice Scarfs, and the Habanberry still intact to play around Focus Sashes. So a Dragon Pulse on the next turn kills Kingdra before he can do a damn thing. And the same thing happens to Drake's Salamence next. After that, Latios comes in for a sibling showdown. I could go for a Calm Mind here, but she could set up with Calm Mind herself, so my best bet is to just go for damage. Turns out there's some pretty bad blood between siblings because Plutonium ruthlessly crits her for the one-shot. Next is Rayquaza, but the frail Space Noodle gets one-shot by another Dragon Pulse. So too does Altaria because Plutonium gets another critical hit, and then poor Flygon, Drake's final Pokemon, also goes down to a single Dragon Pulse, completing a very risky sweep of the third member of the Elite Four. That means that through the process of elimination, Glacia is last and I can be fully prepared to fight her. She leads with Glalie and I lead with Tungsten 2 to immediately get rid of the hail. Glalie goes for an Ice Beam for a little bit of damage, and then Flamethrower brings her down to her sash. Anticipating an explosion, I go for Protect, and Glacia makes me look like a Nuzlocking god. Thanks, Glacia! Cloyster is next and hits Tungsten with a nasty Rock Blast, which is guaranteed to hit 5 times thanks to his Skill Link ability. Rather annoyingly, he also has a Focus Sash, which is activated by another Flamethrower. So I have to switch to Hydrogen, who resists a second set of 5 Rock Blasts. Then it's a classic combo of Yawn, Recover, and Kill. That brings in Lapra third, so it's off to Copper on a Freeze Dry. A Volt Switch does massive damage to the point where once again a Discharge would have just killed, but this lets me bring in Cobalt on a Freeze Dry, and then get the kill on the next turn with a Thunderbolt. Fourth is Sneasel, so I switch to Tungsten 2, who gets nailed by a very nasty knockoff. The AI in this game loves using knockoff. I switch to Cesium for his debut battle. That damage indicates that this Sneasel is probably choice banded, so I decide to stay in, tank a now non-boosted knockoff, and kill the little weasel with a Brick Break. Fifth is Walrein, so it's back to Cobalt on a Waterfall. Thanks for the recovery. Thunderbolt does just about 50% as Walrein sets up a Swords Dance. That's neat, but it doesn't matter because another Thunderbolt gets the KO. Glacia's final Pokemon is Articuno, who seems to be running a Pressure PP Stall set with Substitute, Roost, and Leftovers. But since we outspeed, there's not much she can do here. Eventually, Articuno goes for Hurricane, putting them in range to one last Thunderbolt, which wins us the final fight of the Elite Four. All that's left are the fights against the 2 champions of the game. The first is against Wallace, who we have a moderately good matchup into, assuming that he actually has 6 Water-type Pokemon. He leads with Golduck and I lead with Copper. This could be bad if Golduck has Swift Swim, but he doesn't. He has Cloud 9. Brilliant play from Wallace there. A Volt Switch kills Golduck and grants me a safe switch into Tungsten, which removes the Perma Rain. Walrein comes out, and this one seems to have the same Waterfall Swords Dance set as the one we saw literally 30 seconds ago, so Cobalt once again kills her with 2 Thunderbolts. And third is Lapra. Okay, we also just saw one of these. I'm not exactly complaining, but it is a little lame. A Protect reveals hidden power, so regardless of what type that is, it's not going to do anything to Copper. We can then Volt Switch on the following turn, which crits for the one-shot, bringing Wallace down to just 3 Pokemon as Cobalt comes back out. Starmie is fourth and outspeeds to land a fairly strong Thunderbolt as we retaliate with a Freeze Dry that leaves them with a Sliver. I Protect on the next turn as Starmie goes for Recover, but that's totally fine because I can now switch back to Copper on another Thunderbolt, which activates her Lightning Rod ability and gives her a special attack boost. Thunderbolt then KOs Starmie, bringing in Kyogre. Want to see something satisfying? A +1 Choice Specs boosted Thunderbolt gets a clean one-shot on Kyogre. Copper's such a good girl. Kingdra is last, so I switch to Cobalt on a Draco Meteor that misses. But based on how much the one does on the next turn, the only way Kingdra would have been able to kill Cobalt is with a critical hit. A Freeze Dry gets the final KO and Wallace is defeated. Which means that we've made it to the very last battle of Emerald Rogue against the former champion Steven Stone. What's up, dude? I brought you a letter from your dad, but now you've gotta go. Steven leads with Skarmory just like in regular Emerald. I lead with Cesium, who's equipped with a Focus Sash to ensure that we can get up a layer of Stealth Rocks. Then I hard switch to Tungsten 2 to remove the Sandstorm and tank a Body Press. From here, Skarmory starts setting up spikes, but that's fine, because our Flamethrower leaves him with a Sliver thanks to Sturdy. And on the next turn we can kill with a Rapid Spin and also get rid of spikes. Though unfortunately Skarmory has Roost, so I need to first hit him with a Yawn, then a Rapid Spin, and finally kill with a Flamethrower on Skarmory's first turn of sleep. No spikes for you, Steven. Metagross is second, so I switch to Plutonium on an Earthquake. Fearing a Meteor Mash, I switch back to Tungsten 2, but Metagross just switches, indicating that they're likely banded or scarfed. Fortunately, it's Scizor that comes in, so after tanking a knockoff, a Flamethrower burns her to a crisp. This brings Metagross back out, so once again, it's off to Plutonium on an Earthquake. This time, Metagross switches out into Latias, which is pretty surprising and scary, especially because Plutonium doesn't have a Dragon-type move. I figured I wouldn't need one for Steven, the Steel-type trainer. At the very least, Plutonium's Mystical Fire does lower Latias' special attack, but without a good Dragon Resist or a way to hit her for solid damage, this is definitely scary. I switched to Hydrogen on a Draco Meteor, which is apparently the Focus Blast of Emerald Rogue because Latias misses. She connects with the next one though, which does massive damage since Hydrogen's ability Unaware ignores the Mystical Fire special attack drop. But since we successfully got off a Yawn with Latias, I can now switch to Cesium on a -3 Draco Meteor, which thankfully doesn't KO. This means we can hit her with a Rock Slide on her first turn of sleep, bringing her into the red. Steven then switches into Metagross, so Cesium's second Rock Slide doesn't do much. And unfortunately, because I can't tell whether Metagross will go for Earthquake or Meteor Mash, we gotta make a sack here. Frustratingly, it's Earthquake, so Cesium goes down for nothing. But it's better safe than sorry. Thank you for your sacrifice, buddy. Plutonium comes back out, and Metagross switches out for the third time. I assumed that Latias would die to Stealth Rock Chip on the switch, but she actually survives, which makes my Calm Mind play on Plutonium pretty greedy. Especially because in a shocking twist, Latias is faster than Plutonium. Fortunately, she stays asleep, but that could have been pretty bad. Metagross comes back out, but with the boost from Calm Mind, Mystical Fire is enough to take them out. Celebi is Steven's 5th Pokemon, which is quite the surprise, though ultimately not a problem at all. Despite surviving a Mystical Fire, their best move seems to be Psychic, which ever so slightly tickles Plutonium before he recovers back all the damage with his held leftovers. Celebi falls on the following turn, leaving Steven with his final Pokemon, Jirachi. But the Little Wishmaker falls to a single Mystical Fire, which wins us not just the battle against Steven, but the entire run of Emerald Rogue. Whoever said that 4th time's the charm was a certified genius. And speaking of geniuses, I want to give a huge shout out to PokeAbby, the creator of this ROM hack. Redesigning Pokemon as a roguelike was a brilliant idea, made even better by top-notch execution. If you've found that the tired formula of Pokemon RPGs has left you feeling tired, then I really can't recommend this game enough. It is so much fun, and now that I've beaten the game, I've unlocked a bunch of new settings that I can use to customize future playthroughs, like introducing all the Pokemon from the first 8 generations of the game, adding Mega Evolutions, changing gym leaders, increasing trainer difficulty, and so much more. I'm just getting started with Emerald Rogue, so if you want to see more videos of my future playthroughs, let me know in the comments down below. But as always, thank you all so much for watching. Being able to play these different types of ROM hacks and still have your support has really made me enjoy making content more than if I could only play the same vanilla Pokemon games over and over and over again. If you enjoyed this video, it'd be great if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. Or don't, I don't know, but I do know that you should follow me on Twitter and Twitch to keep up with streams of my future ROM hack challenges. You should also subscribe to my highlights channel to get highlights of the challenge I'm currently streaming before it's cut down to a video on the main channel. And you should consider subscribing to my Patreon or becoming a channel member on YouTube, which are the best ways to directly support the channel. The links to everything are in the description below. Stay tuned for more Nuzlocke videos, and until then, remember to always, always, always play around the critical hit.